Thursday, March 7th. I've had a lot of coffee. I got up at 5 a.m. this morning. I did for a little run. I'm excited to be here today leading the governance committee. So good morning to everyone. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for those who are joining us from the webcast. Let's go ahead and jump in. It's the board governance committee, and I think, Brian, we start with you. That Brian, not that Brian. The other Brian, Brian S. Would you do roll call for us, please?
The State Controller, Ms. Gallegos.
Here.
Ms. Yamamoto.
Here.
Mr. Tang.
Here.
Mr. Gunning.
Here.
For the Director of Finance, Ms. Miller.
Here.
Chairperson Hendricks, you have a quorum?
Thank you, Brian. Please, thank you.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there's not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information such as their last name, age, or school may not be shared. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, so we have item number 1, which is our approval of the committee agenda. It's been moved by Gail, seconded by Ken. Any questions, edits? All right, we have our agenda approved, Brian. Our second item is policy revisions. I'm not going to read that whole thing. There's a lot there. So I'm just going to hand it over to our lawyer, Brian, our general counsel, Brian, for item number 2. Thanks, Brian.
Known as OG Brian, by the way.
I was just, okay. I like it. All right, Brian.
Thank you. This item is to present a proposed policy revision or addition, I think is the better term, for authority that exceeds the current limitation of $1 million for staff to enter into agreements in the instance of a security breach defined by our security policy. And the purpose, we just went through, an incident recently, and we had to place contracts really quickly. And the cost of the contracts are pretty expensive. And so what we realized as we were looking at it, that we have this, and it's a very good limitation, we have this staff limitation of over $1 million we need to come and get board approval. But that's not agile enough for information security or security breaches. If you remember, and I'm sure you do, at the top of your mind is our risk management and our risk assessment. And that your very top risk is your information security and cyber risk. And the reason of that, and Phil is the guru on risk, I think he's sitting back there, but the reason is Phil Burkholder. So the reason is because most of the risk we assess on, whether or not the likelihood and then the severity. So it's really a two-dimensional analysis. When we looked at information security, the reason it's so high is we have a third element, and that's velocity. And that's what this is related to. This is related to the velocity of an incident and the standard board process and meeting and your meeting calendar. So even the emergency meeting, because maybe we could get this under the, sort of the safety definition for an emergency meeting, would still require an amount of time and also trying to get the board members together. So we looked at this and we thought, okay, we need to be able to respond immediately and we need to put these contracts into place. And they're contracts with like credit monitoring. It is also, we have to contact all the members. We have to do that by mail because we don't have universal email addresses. So we can't do that by email. So then we have to produce letters. The California law is very specific about what those letters, you probably have received them. about what has to be in those letters. They're usually like 2 pages, and then they have to be mailed. We have 1 million members, so right there, you think about the cost of just mailing out those letters, and already you're starting to get up there on what it is you have to pay. And then if you're using the same contractor as we did last time for credit monitoring, you very quickly have gotten up to the limit. And we think that, based upon your prior amendment to the contracting authority for emergency during the pandemic, so it was based upon the governor's emergency orders. We think if we have certain controls in place, so one, there's an external marker of when we can use it. So it's not a subjective decision by staff. It has to be it has to be declared as an incident. And then it's the authority is the CEO, and we tried to put in 2 levels for each one, which I'm going to suggest an amendment to the language that I've proposed, which is to put the deputy general counsel in as well, because I realize we only have one legal authority in there. We need to have a backup. So, and we have a great deputy general counsel. So I thought that's a change I'd like to propose.
So that's not in there right now?
No, it's not in there. That would be if you approve the language.
We would adopt with that amendment.
I'd want to add that.
Yep.
So we have internal controls. So we have the CEO, the general counsel makes a recommendation because it's legal, plus the Information Security Office reports to the general counsel. And then we have board leadership. So at least there's visibility on what it is that we're doing. And then we come and report to you, similar to the governor's emergency order authority. Then we come and report to you as soon as possible what it is that staff has done. The law supports this, so there are sections of the law which is cited in there that allows you to delegate anything, and then you can delegate it to the CEO, and the CEO can sub-delegate to staff. And then there's 2 types of delegation. One is just carte blanche delegation, and the other is delegation, but come back and check with us. And so that's really the part of the statute that we're trying to fit into. So we think we've designed it in a way that gives us the authority and the agility to respond and get in place what we need to, put some limitations on it that you're already comfortable with the governor's emergency order, has both leadership and legal input, and then has board input through the board leadership. So we have the CEO or COO, and we tried to put in more than one person in case the person's not available. Which we also have in our incident security response plan, is we have levels and backups. So I'm happy to answer any questions. The other thing I'd mention is the amount. So right now, we know what the amount of our out-of-pocket costs could potentially be if something happens before we get into any coverage. We don't expect that amount to stay stagnant, so we try to sort of come up with a figure that we think is realistic based upon our expenditure last time. Because if you remember the last instance, we didn't have to do anything with our system. It wasn't actually a breach of our system. So we didn't have to bring in forensics to look at our network, to look at our servers, to do anything like that. It was all third party. But if we had to bring in forensics and other technology people, we would very easily exceed the limit that's currently in policy. So I think that's really what we're trying to get at, is have that authority to respond, have a reasonable amount. So, in the prior, we had up to 10 million. I think 5 million will, cover us for the next couple of years if we're looking at the potential out-of-pocket cost. Of course, we'll come back and report if we have to use it. And if if it needs revision, we'll make the revisions appropriately.
Great, thanks, Brian.
So, happy to answer any questions.
Yep, Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Bartow, who declares a state of emergency when it comes to information, this type of a breach?
We have we have an emergency response team. So there are standards. So it would be the captain of the team. Right now, that's somebody from the Information Security Office who takes a look at it, declares a breach, and then brings in executive.
And I don't I'm talking to a lawyer, so maybe I can get into words here.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Declares a breach seems different than declaring an emergency.
Well, you're probably,
And I don't mean to mince words, but
No,
I think that
you're
we're
absolutely
in
right.
that
I'm
sort of
glad you're
space.
pointing that out, because in our minds, any breach is an emergency. So there really is, there may be a difference. I didn't conceive of one when.
I'm just
we put
thinking
this
a
together.
breach of information could be I hand one of my seatmates here my social security number, which is a bad idea, particularly to him. And that's a data breach. A breach and an emergency are levels of things.
Yeah, and perhaps we should have put the definite, so your example would not be a breach that would trigger our incident response policy. So there's an evaluation process that goes through before it's declared a breach, like there was.
Declared an emergency.
Well, a breach, so an urgent matter. Emergency is defined by the Public Contract Code, so it is an emergent item for us. And so, yes, we declare it an emergency, we have to act right away.
Yeah, I think I would want to figure something in between there. To me, there's a lot of space in between a breach and an emergency.
So Brian, I'm just reading the language in the recommendation, and it says, staff recommends amending the policy to specify that in the case of a information security incident, that's the language in the recommendation.
Yeah, and that's
Is
what our
that the
policy-
language that we should be looking at for, I guess I'm looking also to our colleague who's, is that the language that we're using?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
the language that we're using.
It's in the recommendation, that first line. I don't know if that helps. And I guess maybe to kind of amend Patrick's question, like, and I apologize, I looked through the policy, does it define what an information security incident is in the policy?
In the information security policy, not in this policy.
Got it.
So it
Okay.
cross-references the information security policy,
Got it.
which we're happy to provide you a copy of that.
May I?
So I'm going back to Patrick since he was the one who started the question, so.
Yeah, just looking over what I have in front of me, which is the delegation authority, which is a contract code, which says an event an officially declared emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're looking at the one, the prior, that's the confusion. You're looking at the prior delegation that we had.
No, that's,
No,
Which is the one, so it's the one that we adopted. So you'll see that on page 2, the second paragraph. That's the one that the board adopted during the pandemic that was related to the governor's declaration of emergency. So that's why I said we had an external marker, so it wasn't just on our, it just wasn't our discretion. If you see on the bottom of page 1, on attachment 1, is the language in red. It says, in order to quickly reduce or eliminate the effects of an information security incident as defined in the Information Security Incident Response Plan policy, with the approval of the board chair or vice chair, and on the recommendation of the general counsel, the chief executive officer, or the chief operating officer. And so that's the language we're looking at.
I think that what we're looking for is just consistency in language. And whereas in the second paragraph, the first sentence is in an officially declared emergency, and I know that you want to amend the section right below it. I'm just looking for, you know, does there have to be something declarative of an emergency, or
No.
to your point, is any data breach? And then why do we have the, in the event of a declared emergency language, if that is?
We're not amending that. That's existing language that the board has already approved, and that is specifically related to in the officially declared state of emergency. So that's the governor's power to declare emergency, or it could be a county or city executive.
And so, Mr. Bardo, let me make sure that I'm understanding. So what you're saying is declared emergencies, we're already covered. Looks like you have $10 million worth of sole source contracts that you can execute, correct?
Yes.
I'm just looking at it, right? And then what you're looking to do is in the case of information security incidents, which is not in a declared emergency,
Right.
that you want to be able to act separately for up to $5 million
Up to, right,
of an allotment.
right, based upon the information security incident response policy.
And because these types of incidents move so fast,
Thank you.
that's why in this particular case, you'd like to have this additional type of approval.
Yes, because it happens so fast and because of the board meeting schedule, the ability to be agile enough to respond without having to come back under our normal policy to get full board approval of a contract over $1 million, that this would be a very narrowly tailored exception related to a security incident.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to have Amy jump in to maybe provide clarification, so go ahead, Amy.
So thank you, Madam Chair. Amy McDuffie, Mosaic Governance Advisors. For the record, I think I see what you're saying, Mr. Henning, and there's a couple of different ways you can read a policy as someone who's interpreting this, right? And sometimes each paragraph is additive as you read through, it builds on each other. And I think what Mr. Bartow is saying is that these, if you look at A, the first scenario that's presented in this first paragraph is the normal circumstance, right? And then B is intended to stand on its own as the emergency, the state of emergency. And I think the paragraph that Mr. Bartow is suggesting is its own scenario.
I would just say that emergencies by definition are not a normal scenario. And so I'm a little concerned about that. And then I would also say, we want to make, at least I want to make sure that you guys have all the authority to act in between board meetings as much as possible.
Yeah.
I believe that that's been granted already by highlighting these particular types of instances. Is there a concern that other types of instances where there's a physical security breach to the building or any number of different incidences that don't reach the level of an emergency, that you wouldn't have the authority to act because now you're calling out one individual type of incident? Do you see what I'm saying? If you're making a narrowing statement, by definition, you're saying that all these other things are not acceptable for you to act under the current rules.
Yeah, and to respond to your point and just to clarify, the normal scenario that I mentioned is the language, that first paragraph that immediately follows a delegation of authority, any contract or purchase, which exceeds $1 million in cumulative value. That would be the normal delegation of authority that I think staff has had. The board has delegated to staff. And then the second paragraph, in the event of an officially declared state of emergency. That's kind of a standalone paragraph as I read it from a person reading policy, that I'd say, okay, that's a second scenario, a separate scenario. And then if I go further, and this would be like an A lowercase 3, right? In order to quickly reduce or eliminate the effects of an information security incident, that's a separate scenario where you have an information security incident and with the parameters of how the delegation springs forward when that situation is in existence. And so maybe what it could be here is making sure that we just define A1, A2, A3 to make it much more clear that these paragraphs in sequence are not additive. Or to be read as additive. I don't know if that helps. I know it's a small nuance, but I just wanted to bring that forward, just hearing the conversation.
I want to add that we, because, your fiduciary responsibility, we avoid trying to give, any sort of blanket authority to staff. And so what we're trying to do is narrowly define, because we're asking for delegated authority. And so, we'd have to have a much larger conversation, I think, if we wanted to do a blanket delegation. And I think, again, I think we'd have to run out all those scenarios. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do in the future, but this is an immediate need for us, and we think we've narrowly tailored it so you could be comfortable as fiduciaries that we have created a process that really is responsible and also provides, for you, ultimately transparency on what we've done. And the prior one, and I'm sorry for the confusion in the write-up, and maybe I could have been clearer. The prior one that we worked through was when we were in the middle of the pandemic and we realized we had to spend money. And it was the reason was because the governor had declared a state of emergency. So again, trying to narrowly tailor these exceptions, again, trying not to take away duty from the board, we linked it to officially declared emergencies. So it's not if the CEO or COO or general counsel says, oh, we got an emergency. It's really, there has to be an officially declared emergency. I think your points are great. I think we may want to come back and say, you know what, do we need to tailor something when there is an emergency that's not officially declared and it's not an information security breach, but as you said, if it's a building issue or those, so I think it's an excellent suggestion, and I think we can come back with some sort of proposal with that.
I'd appreciate that. At least that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable. I want to be able to give CalSTRS the ability to operate daily on a very smooth go-forward basis, irregardless of what incidents come after it. Whether it's, God forbid, delegated or a real emergency, whether it's a pandemic or wildfires or whatever. But want to make sure that the incidents that happen in the daily operation of a building and operations such as CalSTRS at this largesse, that you're able to do that on a go-flow basis without stopping and waiting and when's the next board meeting for us to come at you.
That's great, and Amy and I will work together with the chair and try to come up with something that we can present.
Right.
This particular authority, though, I just want to, we may need to use it tomorrow.
Right, I mean, yeah, that would be my only, I do think actually this language does do exactly what Mr. Henning's suggesting, and I do want to make sure that you have the nimbleness, if you will, if something were to happen, God forbid, tonight or tomorrow. But obviously we want to be thoughtful. Gail, oops, as I knock over my pen, I didn't spill anything.
Thank you. I
ahead,
just
Gail.
wondered if there was a way to just combine these two terms, because I do think that unless it's so well understood, it's not necessary. But I think to Mr. Henning's point, we kind of have there's the contract provisions that we seem to be amending, even though as Amy runs through it, I do think if now that you understand, Mr. Bartow, like if we could adopt it as amended, just to clarify these pieces, that just in terms of this security breach equaling emergency, I think it seems as though in this write-up we've conflated the terms just a little bit. So there may be an opportunity for clarity. I don't think we need to wordsmith it now, but now with the feedback, I think that would add.
Yeah.
And then later, to Mr. Henning's request, you could come back on other emergencies, but just being more precise in the definitions of breach and emergency being synonymous in this case, I think that could be helpful.
Well, I do, and we will look at that. I will tell you the reason that we parsed it out is because we are a public agency and emergency is defined in the public contract code. And we were concerned that we might not meet that definition of what's this, because it is a very narrowly written definition.
That's a good point. So maybe then what we can do is just add clarity that a breach is considered just because we have to, the breach is an emergency to the enterprise and to the enterprise's data. So maybe then that specific fact, it may not always meet the definition of an emergency in the contract code. I think that's where you're hearing the need for some clarity. My guess is with your brilliant team, it will be minor, but just that a breach when you have this much data and this many members is an emergency. It may not necessarily meet the definition in the contract code, but it's still important that we act on it immediately. So maybe, I certainly don't think, again, we need to amend it currently.
I've got another person. Ken, go ahead, Ken.
Okay, thanks. It sounds like we're in agreement as far as concept goes. So I'm ready to move that forward and then maybe have staff follow up with the cleanup language. Is that like in order, Madam Chair?
Is that,
We can certainly do it. I understand the concept.
okay.
I just want to be careful, so I will try to come up with language that allows us to move forward without not meeting the definition. In other words, having our own definition of what constitutes an emergency, as opposed to the public
And not being
contract code.
explicit in this policy.
And maybe that's the sentence, right?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Henning, for your
thank
line
you.
of inquiry. And any other questions from committee members? So I think where we're at now is, are people feeling comfortable that we can, I guess I'm feeling the awkwardness of, I appreciate actually the suggestion to have more clarity is always better. So being clear about what we're agreeing to, the delegation of, to the chair or vice chair to ensure that the board is informed, but it gives you the nimbleness to act right away. But that you'll add some language that provides more clarity in terms of definition of.
Definition that indicates that it is a institution or a system emergency.
Yeah, not a state
Right.
emergency.
So, and that, yeah, we'll put our pointy lawyer heads together and come up with a phrase.
Great.
So excellent input. So we can make that change, and then the change I suggested about, adding another layer of the deputy general counsel in addition to the general
I was
counsel.
going to ask, okay, so we'll add many of you might know, is he in the room? He's not, okay. But yeah, the assistant general counsel, just in case something. So in terms of process, where do we go from here with,
You can approve it.
okay,
If
With the
if
suggested
you want to,
amendments?
with the amendments as directed by the board governance.
are people
committee.
comfortable with that? Okay, great. So it's been moved? Okay, it's been seconded by Ms. Gallegos. Do we need a roll call vote? Okay.
We do.
I'll call you Brian S. How's that? Brian S., can you do a roll call vote for us?
Ms. Gallegos? Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning? Sorry. Mr. Henning?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Chairperson Hendricks, would you care to vote?
I would, and I'll vote aye. I do want to mention that I believe the superintendent, I think, Elizabeth, you had said you were on every committee. Okay. I don't see you on the committee, but you are welcome to be here. So we are glad to have you on the dais, and you can do what you need to do, but we welcome you and your voice. But yes, I will vote yes.
With
Thank
that,
you,
the motion
Brian.
passes.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. Appreciate that. We are indeed stronger together, that's for sure. Okay, let's move on. We have a consent item, the approval of the minutes. Are there any edits, Karen? Looking at you. They've been incorporated, of course, because she's already given the feedback, and it's, okay. So again, thank you, Karen. And then consent agenda item is the general counsel's governance report. Does anybody want to pull that? Questions on that? I will take it as read. Okay, I don't see any. So let's move on to item number 5, which is progress updates on revisions to the board education program, which I love talking about. So board education, and we've got new board members obviously here, so opportunities for us. So I will hand it over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Great to see you this morning. And also very eager to hear your feedback and input on some of the initial changes that we made to the board's education program as a result of the governance committee's conversation in September. So that's the order of business that we have, is to hear your comments on some of the changes we already made. And then we'd like to present to you the blueprint of the virtual education library that we've designed and get your direction on that. So it should be a good conversation. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So the refinements that we made, and again, the backdrop of this was provided in the write-up. We always take a periodic review of your board education program. The board has made it clear in the past, as has this committee through multiple points of emphasis, that having a board education program that's aligned with best practices is what is important to you. And those best practices, important to note, do not just come from public sector and other public pension funds. The mandate that I've always interpreted and applied is that we are supposed to look broadly across other sectors, including the corporate sector, to identify what best practices are and infuse those into the moments that matter here with your board education program. So that was the task at hand. We reviewed this again in September. You're still in alignment with best practices, but out of that conversation, we were able to identify a number of preferences from the committee to make the program even better. And you can see what those are here. So we wanted to look at the curriculum and essentially assign it a leveling approach by your years of service on the board to help provide more guidance to new trustees as they join the organization and serve on the board with a roadway so they can acquire the necessary learnings of how CalSTRS operates internally, as well as the industry more broadly, and importantly, the aspects of culture and working rhythms of the board that enable the board to be so effective. We also heard that you wanted more peer-to-peer interactions incorporated, and the pandemic had interfered a bit with those interactions for all of us, but in particular in this area. So we wanted to rejuvenate those and be really thoughtful and intentional about how we integrate those going forward. You told us that you wanted to see more board communications around board education opportunities, and rightfully so. There are so many. There are just so many. I feel like I get emails every single day announcing different virtual opportunities and in-person opportunities, and I'm sure you do too. So identifying what's high value based on board experience, and then also making sure that we can help you stay in front of those things was important to you. And then finally, I mentioned this a few moments ago, designing a virtual library to accommodate this notion of a self-paced education opportunity that would help enhance the learnings around how CalSTRS does business and what would be important for board members to know about that as you implement your governance role. So those are some of the refinements that we started to make. And this is a very busy slide, so I want to draw your attention to a few things at the highest level. This is the curriculum that we worked on. And when I say we, I mean we partnered with Cassandra Licknock, your CEO, and then also you see me every single meeting, but I have team members that are terrific and very skilled in helping out and having thoughtful conversations around how this should look. And so I especially want to call out Saba Hashmi and Abhishek Kumar on our team because we had great conversations about this. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we've identified what's important, what's most important as a foundational framing for your year one of board service. Now remember, back in 2019, the big transition that the board made was moving from the concept of orientation, which is typically just a one-time opportunity, to onboarding, which is the series of formal and informal interactions that trustees have within that first year of service to effectively acclimate more quickly. So on the core side, you can see all of the components that are going into that year one. It's often referred to as drinking from 10 fire hoses at once, and it's true, especially for those of you who have gone through it. Ms. Gallegos, you would be the newest person who's gone through that, and I think Mr. Henning, you did recently as well. So that's year one, mostly internal. As we shift over to the middle, we're focused on helping you gain traction and education around the domain areas that matter as it relates to running the business of pension administration and investment management. You can see the sources here are mixed internal and external, but really having a solid grasp on how CalSTRS does business, and you can get that through having sessions with your internal staff as well as outside board consultants like myself or your investment consultants or your ARM committee consultant. And then there's events that we know that trustees from this board have attended that they have said, these are high value conferences. And so those are some of the sources. And then of course, strategic is what we call when you're kind of at that transition of year 3+. Typically, the walk around fact that I always keep in my mind is that it takes about 3 years for a new public pension plan trustee to hit their stride. And I know that seems like a long time. What we're trying to do is accelerate that learning curve for you, but that's why we use that as the marker for this left-hand column to say that this is going to be mostly building on the foundations of education that you've received and helping you identify those specific opportunities where you have an interest or you feel like you want to know more about to be effective in performing your role and helping you zero in on those. And you can see these are mostly external conferences. There's some on the sustainability front. There's some on the corporate governance front, on the institutional investment side. And then, of course, organizations like the National Institute of Retirement Security, NIRS, They have always a deep dive and great research on some very complicated public policy issues relative to retirement security here in the U.S., as well as framing for other countries and what they do. So that's the new curriculum that we had leveled, and hopefully it was helpful to you. I just want to provide context around these examples, and then I'd love to hear your feedback on some of the things that we've done. This is a catalog of high-value external conferences, and I'd say it's an excerpt. This is on Diligent. Everything I'm showing you this morning is on Diligent, and Ms. Licknock sent out an email to the board in, I think, late December. She's nodding, great, late December, that gave you the full catalog of what we had identified and pulled together. And I want to thank staff for their help, especially on the investment side as well. Everything that's highlighted in yellow, the committee's direction was to understand what is it that staff is participating in that they also think board members would have an interest in. And so we really appreciate, Cassandra, your help, as well as Chris Ailman and his team to pull together some of these opportunities. So again, this lives on Diligent, but what we want to try to do is give you advanced planning opportunities so you can identify which conferences may be appropriate to you. So before I get into the virtual content library, let me press pause. I've done a lot of talking, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from you. How is this working for you so far? And is there any further work that you'd like to see us do around this to help you stay on top of these educational opportunities? So Madam Chair, back to you.
I have lots of thoughts, but I will let my committee members go first. And so Deborah, go ahead.
Sure. First, let me say thank you very much, and to staff. It's been incredibly useful, the onboarding process, and I appreciate their patience with all of my questions because I've had a lot of questions, but it's been really, really helpful. And this laying it out by month and with all the opportunities is great because there's so much. You're getting bombarded all the time, so it's really great to be able to focus on what people have found is value added. Are we ready to talk about the policy? I have a question on the policy, or not yet?
We're going to do policy
That would be the next
later,
item.
Okay,
right?
well,
So, yeah,
I'll
we will
hold my
definitely
question
get there,
then on the
Ms.
policy
Gallegos.
for later. But
Great.
thank you, and I just wanted to share that I found it extremely useful.
Appreciate that.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Because I remember my onboard. I think it was back in the day, it was one and done, and I was, it was a lot in one day. So I think we've definitely made some strides over the years. So that's great feedback. Mr. Tang.
Yes, I definitely want to echo Ms. Gallegos. Thank you for doing this, staff and consultant. This is really helpful, I think, as an educator, as a teacher. This is structure, but it also gives you options. And so I love that. I love all the different choices. And I was onboarded through Zoom. So, I mean, it was,
Suboptimal.
so it's definitely something that I would definitely appreciate, especially being a new board member. So this is really helpful. I mean, I'm looking at a lot of these components and I'm like, oh, okay. I love how you broke it up into year one. These are the necessary stuff, and then 1 to 3, and then year 3 and plus. So it really helps me to focus in on, because there's so many, I guess, opportunities for board education that sometimes I'm not sure like what to get at. So that's why I always ask. Like I think my first year I asked Sharon, and then Harry. And then so like the share I'm asking Denise and Harry, like which are the good conferences. And then also like Cassandra would send us, an email saying, oh, this is a good conference for some of the board member to go to. So this has really been helpful for me as particularly, as an educator. I love learning and being in this new role. Even Mr. Chair, Harry Keeley is saying that, he's still learning. So, I mean, it's like, for me, this is like super, super helpful. And it's very structured that in a way where it's very easy for us to just kind of like, okay, we like to do this because it's like it fits right into what I need to understand in order for me to be a better board member. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Tang. And now you're not new anymore. You just got reappointed for your next round. So you're a seasoned veteran now. I love it. Mr. Gunning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just echoing those comments, what's the delivery of this? Is this, because I would have loved to have gotten this day one.
It's in
'Cause
diligence. It's in our board book.
No,
Yeah.
but
Oh.
as a new, did you know this is available?
So I actually did, day one, I did get the board continuing education because.
Sweet,
To Ms. Cohen sent it to me.
perfect.
So, but that was internal. But I think, yeah, just onboarding here, these are some options, would be terrific.
Especially since we have a new appointment coming, so
Right.
that's good to let them see that early.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
Created when you were onboarded,
Yeah.
because we would have
Yeah.
sent it right to you.
Okay.
You would have had it.
Because this really lays out how you
It
want
is,
to think.
But we're always
right? It
making
really is good for
improvements,
that.
yeah.
So appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gunning. I just have a couple of reflections because I've definitely watched us wrestle with board education over the years, and Chris isn't in here, but I feel like Chris Ailman used to say when we first got onto the board, it's like, it's not your charming personality, it's not your attractive, face or witty humor, it's the $320 billion behind your name tag that, people invite you to a lot of stuff when we know that. And so I think one of the things I've been talking to our board about is instead of reacting to invitations, really thinking about, so I'm here year 2, or I'm here year 10, or what am I excited about? Or like, I'm really into sustainable investing, so I'm on the PRI board, and I'm doing things that help me learn in areas that I have interest in that actually relate back to the inner decisions we have to make on investments. And so I think it's that kind of nuance and that customization, if you will, that we're trying to get at here is, so instead of, again, we get emails every day inviting us to stuff. And I have to say, over the years, I just don't do that stuff anymore because I want to travel, and make that time and energy useful in terms of, it just takes a lot of time and energy to go places. And then it takes a lot of time and energy to talk to people. And people don't know that we're actually not the ones like picking managers and making, minute investment decisions. So I do think, for board members to really think through, like, what are you passionate about? What do you want to learn more about? And then go there and go to those places is a good strategy. The only other piece I'd mention, and I don't know how we do this in real time, but I've been trying to go to events with staff. So like, for example, I'm trying to think of things. What's that? Oh, like PRI, yeah, where we have, like, Brian Rice is there. And so I love sitting next to Brian. Gail and I were there and being able to go, hey, Brian, do we have a relationship? I mean, we're CalSTRS, we have a relationship with everyone. So it helps to have Brian go, oh yeah, we just did a deal with them here, and this is how we're thinking about it, or this is where we're at. So I don't know how we capture that, because that's, we have a lot of staff and they go to a lot of places. But I just recently asked Kirsty Jenkinson I just said, hey, what's the SIS team going to this year for 2024? And then looked at my calendar to see, okay, can I at least, I can't do a lot, but if there are 1 or 2 things I could go to that I know one of our SIS team is going to be at, again, just depending on what your interest is, but I found that to be really helpful because it kind of, again, it customizes the learning to our work at CalSTRS. Because there's a lot of these conferences that honestly, to me, it's a lot of like panels and people just talking at you, and I can go at a webinar for that. But to actually, get on a plane and go somewhere, I think I want it to be value add, not only just for me individually, but that it benefits, the board and the enterprise as a whole. So I don't know how we do that, Amy. And certainly board members can do what I did, which is just to reach out to our staff and say, hey, tell me what you're doing. I want to come tag along. But I just think because of our size, that level of insight from our staff and just being able to sit next to someone is really helpful. So just a suggestion.
Thank you for your
All right.
comments. And I always know that we're up for the task to help problem solve and figure out how to make this meaningful for you. So we'll take that on for sure.
Great.
A couple of things I wanted to just underpin before we go on to this, the virtual library blueprint, is that I did hear a request to make sure that we integrate this with onboarding and doing that at the right time. And Cassandra is right, this was new. For example, when Ms. Gallegos, when we onboarded you, this did not exist in this particular framework. So we'll loop that in going forward is a great suggestion. And then a couple of other things I just wanted to underscore is that we do have some supportive tools, and those will continue to help you be reflective, Madam Chair, as you said, about how to select or filter these opportunities to really align with what it is that you're needing. You may recall we do an annual education needs assessment every year with trustees, so you can self-identify those interest areas. We like to also share with you the organization's strategic plan so that you can align your interest areas and the strategy of the organization at that point of contact. And then two other things. One is that we've recently reintegrated the board chair and vice chair into onboarding. And that is such a solid foundation. We've been really pleased, not only with their accessibility and availability, but just providing that anchor of how the board works, the culture of the board, and answering questions. And I thank them for their availability in doing that. Something that we had started before the pandemic, for sure, that got a bit interrupted. And then finally, the outbound communications, I will underscore this because we also want to stay close to ensuring that you feel like the communications are sufficient. Every month, my team and I send you all a governance circle email. In that, we are profiling some governance articles, podcasts, videos that we see that canvas, in a very broad way, what's happening in the scene of governance and for boards more generally. And at the bottom of those emails, we'll use this to profile what's coming next. So again, this is all in Diligent, available for you to access. However, we did want to add some push, if you will, of these events so that they were in front of you. And again, these are what your colleagues have gone to. And so you can expect to continue to receive that from us. But if there's another way that you want education conferences to be lifted up, to be more prominent in your mindset, and we can do that differently, just stay open to letting us know about that and we'll make the change.
I'm just standing to stretch, everyone. I'm okay. But I just want to let you know since, I'm fine. Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Thanks.
Sure.
I love all this information and echo what people have said before. I wanted to add that you mentioned the governance circle. I really enjoy that, and I think I particularly enjoy it because you'll say that it is a quick read or a video of so many minutes and things like that. I love that. Another thing that I'm concerned about is I know that we have an education budget. And so sometimes I hesitate because I know some of the conferences that we can attend are free virtue of CalSTRS being a member. And so sometimes I think, oh, am I spending too much money to go to these conferences? Is it going to be a value add? It will be worth it for me to spend that amount of money to go. And so that's one of the things that's in the back of my mind too. And then also just as another afterthought is when we go to these great conferences, we learn a lot. We network with certain people and companies and things like that. And we haven't been able to really share out what we've learned. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to be able to, for us to do.
It's a great idea.
This is a contact that I made, or, just a lot of information and, just sharing perhaps a slide deck that one of the presenters shared with us. So, and I think that's really important too. So I really appreciate especially this calendar and the timelines and things. So thank you very much for staff's work.
I want to respond to a couple of things really quick, and then I'll go to Cassandra and then back to Amy. In terms of the board budget, I will just tell you, I'm not in board leadership anymore. I'm just a regular board member. But I will tell you, and Harry and I have always been supportive of board education. So Cassandra, did you want to say something? I mean, to me, the monetary limit that we set is really just a general guideline. I obviously leave it up to board members to decide if you're going to Zurich every other week, maybe we should look at that. But otherwise, I know I've been on PRI, which is set outside of the US, and I felt sheepish about that in the past because I'm like, oh, I'm going out of the country. But we're a global investor, and I've learned so much from getting to spend time with trustees in other parts of the world, and I think it's informed my conversations here. So I think if it's done in the very culture that we do at CalSTRS, which is to be thoughtful, appropriate, and kind of, just mind our own travel and those expenses. I mean, we spend a lot on travel with our staff, and I don't think we as boards should feel constrained by that within reason. So Cassandra, did you want to add?
I just wanted to say that we take the stewardship of the funds very seriously in every aspect of spending in the organization. And when we're looking at these educational opportunities, we're negotiating costs down to the lowest that we possibly can. So we do get, lower rates a lot of the times, even from what they're published, to make sure that we provide the educational opportunities that you want and need. And remember, I think the best way to look at this is you have educational requirements as part of sitting on the board. And we want to make sure that you have access for the content that you need to be able to perform your governance duties. So, if you have a concern about that, let us know. We set the budget based on the spending and the things that are coming up. Things have increased, yes, because things have increased everywhere because of just the environment that we're in. But I just want you to recognize or know, be rest assured that we look at that and monitor the spending very closely.
So don't feel too guilty about it then.
No.
I mean, you're such a teacher, Karen, which is kind of how I am too, which is, oh, we shouldn't. And then I kind of go, well, but we have staff that are going all around, I just, again, I appreciate it because I think we're always so conservative. And so I think it's just that, it's always that gut check of like trying to be a good steward. Like I know I asked PRI now to reimburse CalSTRS for my travel when I do board business at PRI. And that's another way where I'm trying to be a good steward of like, I'm doing this thing that's related to CalSTRS, but PRI can pay for it, not CalSTRS. So things like that, I think we can be, again, but I also just feel like we're global investors. We have relationships with people in all parts of the world. And so I think, again, with good reason, we should, feel comfortable and thoughtful about how we steward those resources.
Thank you.
For your own education.
Thank you.
Last thing, and then I want to go to Mr. Henning, is your suggestion about how, let's noodle on her suggestion about how, I've been thinking about this too. Like I honestly, PRI was amazing this week talking about the anti-ESG issues in the US, and there was so much in those conversations that I would love to share with the board in maybe a email or something with some videos and slide decks and things. People who want to see it can, and people who don't. So let's talk about that and maybe bring that back to the next governance committee. How can we as board members share what we're learning with each other post-conference? And maybe the conference evaluations we do can be kind of tweaked. So I like that idea.
Good.
Mr. Henning.
You stole my son.
Oh, sorry.
I was
Sorry.
just going to say, I really did like Karen's suggestion because not all conferences are equal. And in as much as I know we do have an evaluation process, et cetera, it means something different to hear from your peers, et cetera. I also would say I really do love this layout and did appreciate my onboarding. The folks like myself, the people from Department of Education, Superintendent's Office, and the Controller's Office, there's oftentimes multiple of us that race through here, so it's a slightly different thing, but we're always trying to share information as much as possible, but very much appreciate this, and the more that we can be reminded of these types of responsibilities, I think is also helpful for the board and the type of governance you're looking for, Cassandra.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Henning. So a little work for us to do maybe between meetings to think about maybe the evaluation for board education and then how the board members can share with each other. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm mindful of time, so we have a few more items to get through. So let's go on to item number 6, which is talking about the policy and policy revisions, which I know Ms. Gavis has.
So, Madam
Do you-
Chair, just
okay.
to interject and back up a little bit, I am interested still on this item if there is any feedback around the digital content library, and I know we are pressed on time, so.
Okay, I was hoping people, okay, yep, sure.
Yeah, and so I would just invite, you see the sketch here, and I think I would invite if anyone on the committee either has something you'd like to bring forward now, that's a significant concept, or you want to follow up with me directly after the meeting, that's an opportunity as well. But we will start implementing this and working with Cassandra and her team to get this built out on Diligent for you.
Right.
And then again, next governance committee meeting, we're going to come back and see how it's working. for you. So thank you for the conversation on this.
My only quick suggestion is with the book, I love this Book of Faces. I would love the representatives that also serve to have their pictures up there too, because we do have, we've had Patrick, we've had Frank, we have, so it might be like maybe on that, no offense, but on the second page, I don't know if we have the room or we can make the boxes smaller, but I just think it helps us and maybe helps the public kind of go, okay, we've got the treasurer and their representatives, just to be inclusive of every person who comes and sits on this dais, so we might consider that. And Gail, go ahead.
Yeah, just really briefly, I think a couple things to include in this would be, just like you're doing, Ms. McDuffie, we've asked Makita and RCLCO to provide some monthly data as well. I think some of the videos that our investment team have been doing would be really helpful, so you could create like a virtual content library for the investments team, but if we could just keep all of those videos uploaded that the team has done, and then the monthly information that we're getting from Makita and RCLCO, just so if anyone has a question going back on any of these pieces, that it could be there as well. So I love
Great.
this. I would just love to see, it's in the fundamentals, sorry. So in addition to those videos, some of the Makita and RCLCO pieces as well, just to keep this big library. And then to the extent that April has other suggestions as she's developing the cost report and the collaborative model pieces, just to make sure that those are included, and the same would go for our SIS team. Just if we could almost create a subcategory of each of the pieces that the board keeps going back to, so that when there's questions, there's just all of this information that folks can go to quickly.
I love that.
And this might be a place, for example, that the Ian Bremmer stuff could live, and then we don't have any copyright necessary. I don't know, I defer to Mr. Bartow, but then to the extent there's just really good information that Chris sends around, for example, it could just live here in addition to just in an email. So we really create this living virtual library that people can refer back to as they learn more. Thank you,
Love
Madam
that.
Chair.
Thank you.
And one thing we didn't really emphasize in talking about all this education, because it's more about conferences and going other places, the best education you can get, especially as a new board member, is to come to CalSTRS in Sacramento on an off-board day when you're not maxed out to the hilt and hang out with Cassandra or Chris, or I know I've done that a few times, and you guys are the experts in this room and in this building. And so to me, some of the best education I've gotten is just right here in this building. So great. All right, so plenty of work to do, right, Amy? Item 6 is the ed policy. Why don't you take us through that, Amy?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll walk through this. And the intent of the policies that we're bringing forward to you today is part of a routine periodic review that we do with your policies in order to ensure that they align with best practices and that also are harmonized with your actual practice. So,
Is her mic not on?
thank you. Thanks, Kirsten. Okay, so now that I can be heard, for this education policy, there were just a couple of things that we did. And again, the significant change, I know it looks like a lot of redlining. What we always try to do is go back through the language. There were some areas of duplication where there was a responsibility section that was very duplicative of what we would typically find in the board responsibilities policy. So we removed some of that duplication. It's kind of a natural evolution of the policy. When you have something new, as we did in 2019, when we put this into place, we were trying to emphasize the focus on onboarding and that shift from a one-day type of event to something that was more involved. And now, as we've gone in and routinized that practice, I think from a policy standpoint, we lift up the language so that we are not being as prescriptive, but are providing flexibility that as new best practices are coming on the scene, that we're able to identify and apply those where it's appropriate. So that's the high-level overview of the policy changes. Again, I know it looks like a lot to you, but in terms of requirements of you as board members, all are still the same. There's no changes to that. This is simply just harmonizing with actual practice and streamlining the policy language to remove duplication. So, Madam Chair, if there's questions, I'd be glad to address those.
So you're looking today for feedback, and if we like what we have and we don't have any significant changes, we could approve this today if needed, correct? It's an information item, but we could transform it into an action item.
Mr.
correct?
Bartow, are they able to?
He's shaking, he's
recommend
nodding.
improvement?
Is that the right word?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Nodding.
I should say it out loud.
Nodding is yes, right?
Yes, it's actually part of your notice when you post the item that you may take action on it.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Ms. Gallegos.
Yes, just one clarifying question. In the requirements on the first page of the red line version, it says participation on certain committees, including but not limited to audits and risk management, and appeals will require additional educational development. Is that prescribed? Is there some place we can go to see what that is, or is it leaving it open for interpretation for those committee members?
Thank you, Ms. Gallegos, for the question. That was actually a question that we asked as well as we were going through the update of this policy. And you have a couple of different places where this is coming in. One is through the ARM committee itself. You have education that gets delivered through the committee setting. And then your ARM committee financial expert, Dr. Yetman, has a responsibility to provide education as well. And I know he does a lot of one-on-ones with ARM committee members. And so for right now, what we've done is not institute any particular sub-requirements. We've let that kind of ride at the highest level and let whatever the needs of individual committee members present themselves for a resolution. But did you have specific idea around something you'd like to see?
That answers my question, but also I would love more audit and risk committee education. It's hard to find that specifically, so
Okay.
An introduction to Dr. Yetman would be welcome.
Okay, so
I
no,
bet he'll
thank you
have
for the
some
question.
ideas for you, Dr. Yemen. Great question, and thank you. Mr. Gunning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. That same question I had, actually right above it where you state every 2 years of service on the board. Is there a list of what 24 hours of continuing education is?
So that's a great question, Mr. Gunning. So all of the opportunities that would be discussed within the context of the policy would qualify. One thing that I know has been put into play more than several years back was to help board members feel confident that when you came to board and committee meetings themselves, that you were getting sufficient education through those board and committee meetings over a 2-year period to easily meet this requirement, right? And I think that's still the approach unless there's been some kind of change, but you're continuously getting education and receiving education through your board and committee meetings, and then annually in your self-evaluation, you'll see this come in July, staff provides a document that kind of per board member identifies what education opportunities you've been to meet the requirement. So you can see that. The requirement itself, keep in mind, is a policy requirement. It is not a legal requirement, which is the case at CalPERS. So there's a variety of ways that we track that, but the intent is for you to get your education through board meetings, if at all possible.
And I think the exclamation point on that is that staff tracks it for us so that we don't have to track it. So you'll see that even when you do an educational evaluation, it'll ask for like the amount of hours that the event, that you kind of track the hours, and then the staff will track that for us. So thank you, staff, for doing that for us. We appreciate that. Great. I don't see any other questions. Are you prepared? Okay.
Yeah, let's take a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, and it's been seconded. All right, so Mr. Henning has moved, and Mr. Gunning has seconded. So any other questions, concerns? We'll do a roll call vote. Okay, Brian S., go ahead.
Ms. Gallegos? Ms. Yamamoto?
Are you clear on what we're voting on, Karen?
Yeah.
The policy.
So we don't have to do public comment on any of these items at all?
You know what, I just forgot. So, good job, Karen. Thank you,
Before we
Karen.
vote.
Bad chair. Well, not, no, we don't. Okay. Karen. I love you, Karen. That's okay. No, you're totally fine. It's totally legit. So, Samantha, do we have any members of the public?
There are no members of the public in the queue.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. In a governance committee, we should probably follow, our governance policy. So thank you, Karen. Are you comfortable?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Tang,
Aye.
Mr. Gunning,
Yes.
Mr. Henning,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Chairperson Hendricks, would you care to vote?
Yes.
Right, motion passes.
Thank you, Brannis. And I will make sure in the subsequent items we will ask. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you. Okay, let's move on to item 7, right, Amy?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, more policy revisions.
Yeah, and again, consistent with just being proactive and routinely reviewing your policies. You have a policy in your board governance manual that's called the policy review policy. And essentially what that specifies is
Not
how you're going to
redundant?
be, that it is an important responsibility of the board to oversee the policies and update those as things change. And so, again, mostly what you'll see here in the red line changes, because there was a lot of additional language that we added this time. And it was just to harmonize with current practice. The one change that you'll see was that the policy as it stood required you to review all of the policies in your board governance manual once every 3 years, which is a bit much. If you look at what best practices are for policy review, it's usually between 3 and 5 years. So 5 would be your outer limit, and I think in particular when you have a process like a public process like this that you'd like to go through, you want to give yourself some flexibility to be able to thoroughly review all of those policies. And in talking with your general counsel, we felt that 5 years would be more realistic, knowing that the board at any time can call up a policy for review. It doesn't have to be within a set period of time. So that was the change. And then, of course, you may all remember that through the board governance committee, there was this request from the general counsel's office, or an expectation, I should say, that the general counsel's office has the administrative oversight for the governance policy manual. And as you know and see very frequently, when we add new policies, like in September, you adopted a new policy for committees, right? And so that's going to change the numbering of all the other policies that follow behind it in the board governance manual. And what we wanted to do, and you had wanted to do at the time, was to ensure that that's not something that needed committee and board approval, was just to simply change the formatting or the numbering of the policies. And so we added some language in there to be very clear about the fact that this would be non-substantive authority or non-substantive changes only. And so those are the highs and lows of what you're seeing in front of you. And again, would be glad to answer any questions that the committee has.
Great. Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Just one technical question. This doesn't include any investment committee policies, correct?
That's correct, Ms. Miller. Yes,
Thank you.
there's a very set and prescribed set of policies within the governance manual that the governance committee has authority over, and the investment policies are not included in the governance manual.
Thank you. And then my only other question is, in the review process, the list of factors, we don't want to include the term policy, or does that sort of go without saying? What if there's a policy that's just completely irrelevant to the way we're doing business? Or is it just, because that list isn't exclusive, it is just assumed to be included?
I'm not sure I understand your
sorry,
question.
I'm just in the diligent, so it's in the policy review, in the red line, it just says the review process may include factors such as. I didn't know if we wanted to actually be clear that we can review the entire policy itself to make sure that we're tracking with whatever is going on, or it just uses other technical terms, desired effect, alignment with implementation intent. But for example, if we wanted to get rid of a policy, or I just didn't know if you wanted to use a broader term in the factors that are included, just in the event the board, just so it's not restrictive at all. This reads a little bit restrictive in terms of its review.
Ms. Miller, I appreciate the point. I think it's a good one, because certainly you'd want to prune a policy and just decide not to continue it if it doesn't make sense anymore. And that, I'm not sure if this language appropriately accommodates.
Including the view of the policy in its entirety.
Oh, I love that. Perfect. Madam Chair, is that?
Okay. So with that edit, I
I will
would
move
entertain.
approval with that edit if
Okay,
folks are
so
comfortable.
it's been moved by Ms. Miller.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Henning, second. Any other discussion? All right, go ahead, Brian S., roll call. Oh, any
comment?
members of the public want to
There are
speak
no
on
members
this?
of the public in the queue.
Thank you, Samantha. Brian S., go ahead.
Ms. Gallegos?
Aye.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Henning?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Chairperson Hendricks, would you care to vote?
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Great, item 8, Amy,
Yes.
our charter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So each year, every committee of the board reviews its charter as a matter of best practices. And so we did that for the committee. We had some streamlining that we did here too. And so those are redlined. We also wanted to make sure that we harmonize the charter to reflect the governance committee's involvement, not only in the framework for routine consultant evaluations that the committee is responsible for now, as a matter of a couple of years ago, and then also to identify the committee's responsibility itself to review consultants that report to the committee, such as myself or any other consultants in the future. So those were the significant changes made. The rest of the red lines are simply a matter of tightening already existing language. So any questions from the committee, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions from committee members? Mr. Henning, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
just had a quick one, and it's section 7.5 on page 2. It was purple redlined.
Purple lined.
Was there, and it goes to the election of board members, and so.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Henning, thank you. Yeah, it actually shows as blue lined on mine. I like the colors. This is a responsibility that is typically performed by the board and not the board governance committee. And so, yeah, we have, in realizing that, we
Should
had
take it out of
suggested to strike that.
Thank you for that
Thank you.
clarification.
Great. Any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, I would entertain.
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Gail.
Second.
All right, and Ken, I'll give you the second on that one. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's do, any questions? Any members of the public have comments?
There are no members of the public in the queue.
Thank you, Samantha. Brian, go ahead and do the roll call vote.
Ms. Gallegos?
Aye.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Henning?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Chairperson Hendricks, would you care to vote?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Brian. All right, and then, thank you, Amy, for all your work. And I do want to do a shout out to Jennifer Erden, who is no longer on our board, but she has just been so committed to board governance. If you're watching us, Jennifer, I'm looking forward to talking to you on Friday. And thank you so much for all the work that you've done on governance, your legacy here at CalSTRS, both before you were on the board and in the audience. To on the board, we just really appreciate your service. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Ms. McDuffie, for your help with this, and we will get to work between now and the next governance committee meeting. Brian, do we have any information requests?
The only information request I had was a consideration of evaluating the emergency provisions to see if there should be something broader than what's currently in there, or do we capture that sufficiently?
We did, and we're actually, I'm busy drafting the language, so.
That's all I
Great.
had.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, I understand.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I didn't mention early enough, but can we go back to item number 8?
Sure.
I noticed that on the final version, if you go back to responsibilities, the
Can you give
number
us a
5
page
is.
number, please? Page
Oh.
number?
It's just page 1 of the attachment 2.
Okay,
Number 5 is blank.
good. So it is.
Oh.
This is why we're a team.
Just formatting, right? It's just formatting and then you'll just change, okay.
So there's 7.
Are you on diligent? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
okay. You're fine.
Yeah, on this paper, that's so interesting.
On diligent, it's okay.
Technical glitch.
I'm sorry.
No, on diligent, it's not.
Yeah.
On diligent, it's, you're right.
There's a blank on number 5.
So I believe, so we took a motion and voted on approval
Yeah,
of the matter, and I would imagine that's the.
we have to rescind that.
Actually, if I may jump in, that space is the removal of actually the item that you pointed out in purple. So, and you just approved the ability of staff to make ministerial changes, so we can go ahead and make the number. It really is now just a renumbering issue. So I don't think you have to go back.
Those changes.
Yes. I don't think you have to go back.
So
and-
there'll be 11 instead of 12.
Yes.
Okay.
But it is, Karen, I do just think that it just, the way it got saved.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
one page over.
Because in the printout, it
Yeah.
doesn't have that space.
So
But
we'll
thank
make
you,
sure that
Karen.
that's, the numbering is correct.
But the printout has a blank.
It does.
Oh, okay. I thought you
And
didn't.
diligent also has the blank.
Did you hear what Brian's
Yeah,
explanation is?
yeah.
Okay, so let's.
So we don't
let's
need
move-
to rescind and,
No.
do
we
it
do not
as
need to do
amended?
that. No,
Okay.
we do not
No,
need to do
but-
that.
Okay.
But
Thank
thank you
you so
for
much,
bringing it to our
Karen.
attention. Item 10 is the draft agenda for the next committee meeting. Amy, given the conversation today, we might want to, I don't think there's anything, well, do you want to walk us, anything you want to highlight in the next agenda item?
We'll touch base again with you on
Yep.
the board education program, as we talked about, and then we'll continue on routine policy reviews and bring
Perfect.
forward those that are up for review and need your attention and discussion.
Great, thank you. Any members from the public want to comment on that item?
There are no
Samantha?
members of the public in the queue.
Thank you. Oh, and then the last one is opportunities for statements from the public.
No members in the public.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay, thank you so much, committee members, for that good work this morning. Appreciate it. And Mr. Keeley, Mr. Chair, wants us to go ahead and start at 10:30. So we will take a quick 10-minute break, and then we will come back for the regular open session board meeting at 10:30. So thanks, everyone.